Hello and welcome to We Will Manage, the podcast exploring the weird and wonderful world of work. We are two young professionals figuring out our careers one conversation at a time. Today we're talking about organizational structures. Not as boring as it sounds, I promise.
So stick around to hear about the tribes that run Spotify, how the Matrix exists, and how sometimes it is better to be the big fish in the small pond. We also want to take a little moment to talk about We Will Manage Mondays. So
Are we going to manage Mondays?
In case you missed it, I think it was last Monday, our first little mini episode came out all about pitching. Our idea with these mini episodes are not to interfere in any way with the long form episodes that we're doing on Thursdays. They're just little extras that to begin with, to see if people enjoy. We're going to do once a month and see how it goes. They're just kind of little extra things that we maybe don't have time to talk about in our long form
a lot less
episodes.
A lot more unfiltered, maybe talking about some feedback we've gotten from other episodes or subjects that come up that we can't possibly put into our long episodes because otherwise they would be long.
Yeah, which they already are. So yeah, we're doing it for you, really. And I'm actually really excited about the next one, which we're going to do it the last Monday of every month. This month of June has been a little bit different because of how it was slightly connected to the Art of Communication episode. So that it did come out on the 23rd, but going forward, it will be on the last Monday of every month, just to finish the month with a little extra pick-me-up from us. Mm-hmm. And I'm really excited for the next one because we actually record it in person together. So yeah, watch out for that coming out on the last Monday of July.
And we have some special guests in that one.
Yes, we do have some special guests in that one. But yeah, without any further ado, let's jump into today's episode.
And we're live.
It's
been a while.
Hello. It's been a while.
We've just given each other our updates, but should we give a quick summary?
Yeah. So, Saoirse is now officially a company owner.
I am officially a co-founder. My company is now live.
Books. Yes.
It's called Surface Clean Tech, SARL, which is limited, whatever, LTD?
LTD? Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So you can look it up and it exists. Not much going on about it yet, but it exists.
It exists, and she is one of the co-founders.
If you have any tax advice, I'm the taker.
Ears are open.
And what's new on your side?
And I am relocating my studio to London this summer. I think does this episode come out in 2 weeks? I don't think we're too far ahead with the recordings at the moment. So I think we're pretty, so it shouldn't be. So maybe I'll be moving a couple weeks after you hear this, probably in around a month. So yeah, big, big things happening.
It's a crazy week. So today,
yes,
we're going to be talking. Okay, so it's a subject, right? We're going to be talking about organizational structures. Said like that, it sounds really, really boring.
Yeah.
So
I wonder what we're going to call this episode to make it sound a little bit more interesting, so people don't just automatically go, oh.
This is a subject that I have found very interesting in the past, but calling it what it is makes it sound very boring.
Yeah. I remember you put it on the list for the episodes, and I was like, okay. If you want to do that, I'm not going to get in the way.
We're doing it. You feel free to skip. No, don't. It's going to be fun, okay?
Yeah.
I'm going to try and make it fun. So I'm not going to give any context, first of all, about what an organizational structure is. And I'm just going to ask you a question. So currently at your studio, you have one employee.
Yeah.
So you work together. Full stop.
Yeah.
If you were to hire 3 more people for your company, do you know how you would organize them? Would they have their own roles for different departments? Would they be assistants for the current roles? Where would you place them?
I think so. 3 extra people. I think at least 1, if not 2, would probably be the heads of their own departments. Whereas 1 would probably be a bit more like of an admin person that would kind of assist with other things between the departments, if that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. No. Yeah. I think I stand behind that. Yeah.
What those departments would be. So currently, maybe talk to us a little bit currently about how you work.
So we're a branding studio, and I do everything that's related with branding and websites. And then my current team member, she is the head of social media management and anything to do with social media. There would probably be a head of marketing, if we could do that. And then that's where I don't know what would make more sense. So maybe it would make sense to have one of the people take on more between branding and website. I do prefer the branding. So websites can be a bit more technical, less creative. So maybe I would get somebody to do more website stuff. And then an admin person. I think that's something that I have wanted to do. Kind of, I always thought like the third person that I would get would probably be kind of admin stuff. There's a lot of client, management and all that stuff that takes up a lot of my time and Claudia's time. And then just like organizing shoots for, content creation and all that, like all that kind of stuff, creating mood boards and all that would be really cool if one person could do that. And that way we don't have to. Yeah, I think head of marketing and a kind of admin person.
Yeah, some kind of head of logistics or...
And then, I'm not sure if there are other things that we could do, but maybe it would be more useful either helping in websites or have an assistant kind of inside of the social media department.
Interesting. And in the way that you work now, just with your one other team member, you do the branding, so you make all the calls on the branding side of things. Yeah. And then she's in charge of her social media clients. Yeah. When it comes to making decisions, is she pretty free to do what she wants and then you're there to support her, to run things by you if she needs it? Or do you get her to validate things with you at pretty much every decision?
Yeah, she is free to make most decisions. She does make most decisions. Then we have weekly calls where we kind of catch up on all of that. She does, however, normally before confirming back to the client, does run it past me. Just like, by the way, this is, like, even if it's not, say we have our meeting on the Wednesday and then something comes up or whatever on the Thursday or Friday, then she might send me a message about it. I think if it's things to do with social media, she has much more also just confidence to kind of take it in her own hands. When it's something that's more to do with the client, with changing contract, with changing the plan we have with them, something more like specific like that, then I take the reins on that and I make the final calls on that, which makes sense.
Okay, cool. So organizational structures, do you know what they are? Do you have an idea
that there's vertical and horizontal.
So that's the two main examples of organizational structures. Basically, I think a good way to define them is how information and how decisions flow in a company. So in vertical, so the two main well-known organizational structures are vertical, hierarchical, kind of like if you imagine an army, you have the boss and the commander or whatever he's called, and then you'll have some people under him that are going to come in, some people under them, and so you have this kind of pyramid structure. So that's a vertical structure of a company, and that's what lots of the big companies that we know of, and it's kind of the traditional way to run a company is you have a big boss, and then you have managers that manage managers, and then those managers manage teams. So decisions flow up and down. So for that person to be able to make a decision, they have to ask that person, then that person has to ask that person, and goes up So at the end of the day, the person making the main calls is the boss. It's the CEO or the person in charge of the company.
He has the final say.
Yeah, exactly. And then on the contrary, you have horizontal structures, which is more responsibility based. So information flows horizontally. So you'll have different teams or different people in charge of different things. And then they make the calls on what they're in charge of. And then they usually, like you said earlier, they update each other. They make sure that everybody knows what's going on. So they'll have like weekly meetings where everybody knows, or they have to work with each other on certain things because they each make the call on their own department, but maybe different departments have to be involved. So it's a lot more kind of flexible. I'd even say chaotic, but it makes decisions can be made a lot quicker, etc., etc. So yeah, it was kind of to talk about these different ways of running a company, when it's preferred to do it one way and when it's preferred to do it another way. Is there one that is better than the other? Does it depend? Of course, it always depends. We always say the same thing.
Yeah. It all depends.
Yeah. But yeah, so for some examples in companies that you might know, some of the big companies like Procter & Gamble, which is the company that does pretty much any product that you have in your bathroom or something like that. It's all Procter & Gamble. I think they might also do food stuff, but it's mainly like toothpaste and hair shampoo, and they do everything. Pretty much everything you have is Procter & Gamble.
Oh, interesting.
And then same with Nestle. Nestle is a big food company. Unilever also is a big food company. So all of these massive, massive companies that have all of this work and departments, and these are all very traditional hierarchical companies.
Vertical, yeah.
I know a couple of people that have worked in these companies, and it's the traditional climbing the ladder kind of place. Yeah. So you start at the bottom and you work your way up, and it's brutal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then some examples of horizontal companies are like Netflix. Netflix is a horizontal company. Obviously you have people in charge of other people because it's a big company, but how they organize people and organize decisions, it's very horizontal. But they have quite a particular one, so I'll go into that one later. It's quite interesting how they do things. And also Spotify is a relatively horizontal company. So maybe you can figure out already the tendencies. So Netflix, Spotify, creative companies.
Online products versus physical products,
for example.
Interesting. Yeah.
So before we get into details, we're going to play a little game.
Okay, let's do it.
Like a little game. So this game I have named Flat or Stacked.
Flat or stacked. Let's do it.
So I'm going to give some examples of like theoretical companies, and I want you to tell me which structure you think would be the most efficient.
Ooh,
and if you think it's always the same structure, then you can say that. And if you think that, anyway, we'll see what you think, and then we can talk. So number one, you're in charge. You're running a humanitarian aid organization working in crisis zones. Very on topic, unfortunately. You have local teams on the ground, international donors, and constantly changing priorities. Should the structure be horizontal or vertical?
I'm going to say, oof. My head's literally like vertical, horizontal, vertical. My gut was to say vertical.
Why?
Because if there's a lot of things changing constantly, for one person to kind of be the one that's taking all that in and adjusting what then needs to be done, as a knock-on effect from any changes that may be happening, I feel like might be more efficient than horizontal, because something might come in that changes everything, and then for everybody to then coordinate and be on the same page about how each of the different departments need to then move forward might be more complicated. At the same time, the reason I thought maybe horizontal is because then obviously decisions maybe would be quicker. That if each person running each department is well picked,
Yeah.
then maybe it would work better like that, because in situations of crisis, obviously being able to just act when needed is very important.
Yeah, I mean, there's no right or wrong. I haven't prepared a right or wrong answer, but I think I agree with you, and I think that in this case, as long as everybody's able, has the freedom to be able to work properly, so react to certain situations, I think it would be good to have one person in charge, because it's such critical decisions that need to be made fast and implemented. So okay, new priority. Sorry, we can't spend as much time on this place because there's something that needs more help. Whereas if you have each of your departments making their decisions, obviously they're going to think that where they are is the most critical, because that's where they're located. Yeah. So yeah, I think in this case, probably vertical would be the best.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to try another one. So, a creative collective of freelance designers who share a studio. Sound familiar? They all vote on which projects to take, and no one wants to be the boss.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that's a good example of when a horizontal one wouldn't be stressful and chaotic and would be more beneficial. Yeah, it's almost more like it's almost triggering to say this word, but co-working space. It's almost like a group of people who share a space, because it's just easier than doing it by yourself and having that support and stuff, but it's not that there's a boss or something. Yeah, so I'm going to say horizontal.
I mean, I think if you imagine a team of creative people and you have one person telling them all what to do, I mean, I'm sure you'll be able to tell me better than I know, but I feel like losing that freedom to make your own decisions in the realm of creativity, probably not very productive.
Yeah, no, not very productive, because then what you do is obviously going to be, if you're second guessing and stuff and don't have the freedom to do it how you would want to do it, then you can't really. Every designer has their own what's the word, style, yeah. Their own style, I guess. And you can, if you're a good designer, obviously adapt different styles, but the one that you're best at is always going to be the one that you're best at. And the one where your work's going to be the best. So yeah.
So we're going horizontal for this one. Interesting for your reference, perhaps. Try another one. So, a small product design agency building mobile apps. Everyone's cross-trained, which means they know lots of things. And roles change depending on the client project.
I kind of want to say vertical, almost because of the cross-training aspect. To have someone kind of be like, okay, so for this client, we're going to need these different roles. So we need these different people. And, 3 of you can do this job, but I'm going to choose you because I think, that I feel like maybe to put that order, it might be easier.
To reduce the chaotic aspect of things.
Yeah. Yeah, because if I feel like, the more... the more flexibility there is, the harder it is almost to then be productive with it, because if anyone can do anything, then what are we all doing? Then organizing can be hard
to not lose direction.
Yeah, but obviously I think horizontal would also work. I guess it depends how the people work between them, if they do have the capacity to be able to agree and be like, okay, we're going to do it this way, that way. Yeah.
It's funny because we're gonna kind of come back into these situations with the examples.
Okay.
So it's cool to do this before. Okay, I'm gonna do another one, and maybe we can come back and do some more later. So you're building a new pharmaceutical company. The R&D, so research and development, is extremely technical and regulated, but your marketing and sales team want to experiment and move fast.
Like always.
Thank God.
Yes. I think I'm going to have to say vertical again. Just because of, again, everything being a bit more strict and stuff, there still has to be one person. Especially because there are two different fields that you've got a lot of experience with that are wanting to do things very differently. I feel like if there isn't one person to say, okay, no, this time, you've got to calm down, you've got to speed up, whatever. I don't know if anything would get done.
Yeah. I think especially in pharmaceuticals where it's so regulated and you have to be really sure that, the right decisions are being made and following the rules, you kind of have no choice than to make it vertical. Like you can try and give as much freedom as you can to your marketing team, for example.
Yeah.
Like within this, go for it. But don't leave this. Otherwise we might be in trouble.
Exactly.
So we'll go for vertical for one. Yeah. Okay, so the idea with that is that we try and find some like common points. Because I think we agree that it depends on the company whether it's better to have a vertical or horizontal structure.
Yeah.
So to try and figure out what those common factors are. So I'd say vertical structures is very good for places where decisions are very critical. If there's lots of regulations, like in the food industry or things like this, that you can make top-down decisions. So the people at the top, they say, okay, this is what's allowed. And then that is then translated to the people below. It scales really well with big teams because it's a lot more structured. The roles and responsibilities are a lot more clear. So people are able to work. They know exactly what they're there for and who they report to and everything. So it doesn't get vague. So you don't have situations where somebody's maybe thinking they're not in charge and so nobody's doing it, and then they can take you to problems. And then obviously with that you get accountability, which is very straightforward. So if it hasn't been done, who's the problem.
Who you need to speak to.
And then on the other side, vertical structures can vertical. So horizontal, the good things are it encourages people to be autonomous and own their stuff. So it can maybe motivate people a bit more, feel like they're more in charge of what they do. I think it's very good for companies that have anything to do with creativity or innovation that isn't necessarily in strict rules. You also have a lot more collaboration. So that can also trigger innovation. If you have people talking together and then somebody can help somebody else out and bounce ideas off of each other, that's not necessarily something that you need in a pharmaceutical company, but something that you might need in a creative branding company, for example. But and then I put down a few cons of like each. So vertical on the other side to the horizontal, it can make people feel less, they don't have as much control over what they do, and they can maybe feel a bit undervalued, especially if they're not in the place they want to be. So you're constantly trying to be the manager of someone else. So it can lead to frustration. And also information having to travel up and down. It can often slows things down, and maybe things get stuck on the way and somebody doesn't inform somebody else, and then the person that's making the decisions that's right at the top, he can't get the information from the bottom, which isn't something you have in horizontal. But then again, horizontal, it can be very chaotic. I think maybe you have experience. I think both of us have more experience in horizontal structure. So it can be very chaotic.
Even the few jobs that I've had that are before I became self-employed were very much smaller teams. So it was much more horizontal. It was much more, everyone has more flexibility, more freedom. That's the word I was looking for. So definitely more experience with that. But then when you imagine a company, you imagine more vertical. That's what, you kind of think of, because like you say, it's more traditional.
That's a very good segue. Because I have some companies that we know, and I think this is where it gets really interesting. So some companies that we know and how they do things. So They are still considered either one or the other, but they're kind of in between. So, for example, Amazon, they use a concept that is called two pizza teams. And this is something that I've heard in my work experience. And it's basically, they make sure that the teams that are working on a particular product or a particular aspect of that product, it's teams that are no bigger than what you can feed with two pizzas.
So literal then.
Literal two pizza teams.
Two pizza teams. That's hilarious.
So this was something that was popularized by the CEO, Jeff Bezos.
Okay.
And yeah, the idea is that smaller teams are more efficient, more agile, and can make faster decisions. So even though Amazon is such a massive, massive company, they divide themselves into two pizza teams. And these teams are in charge of what they're in charge of, and they make the calls and they get things done, and they eat pizza. So Amazon is still considered a vertical company, a hierarchical company, but it's
with
not
a twist.
Yeah. It's not like the typical
with
pyramid.
a pizza.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then another good example is Apple, which is also still considered a hierarchical company. But basically, so Steve Jobs, the CEO, I don't think he's the CEO anymore, but the famous CEO of Apple, he left for a while the company, and then he returned to the company in 1997, so the year before you and I were born. Great year. And what was then already a big vertical structured, pyramid structure, very traditional company, totally changed. So when he got back, he laid off all of the managers.
Bold.
Yeah, bold. And he went from what you call a conventional business. So you have different business units or divided into products. So this unit is in charge of the iPhone, this unit is in charge of the iPad, etc. And he turned that into functional organization, which means that you have people in charge of different aspects or different functions. So you'd be in charge of the design or the marketing, and I'd be in charge of the engineering, and somebody else is in charge. And then they all work together on all of the different products. So they all have the place where they make the calls, and then they have to work together. So it starts to go towards more of a horizontal structure. Yeah. And that made a big, big difference in how they could innovate and get products out.
Interesting. Yeah.
And that's still how they work, and that's what they're known for now. And there's a quote that Steve Jobs gave when he came back and he did all of these changes to the company, and it was, I quite like this. It's easier to train an expert to manage than a manager to be an expert.
Yeah.
So, imagine if you're in charge of design and you're having to report to somebody that doesn't know anything about design just because they're your manager.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. It slows things down.
Yeah, and it can be very frustrating. You don't have maybe the freedom to go to your full potential because you're having to report to somebody that doesn't really know what the best decisions are.
Yeah, definitely.
So he changed all that.
What about Google? What kind of structure did they have? Do we know?
I don't know. Should we do a quick search?
Yeah, let's do a quick search. I'm just curious, especially when you were talking about innovation within the horizontal structures. Immediately Google came to mind because they have such different models for lots of things. But yeah, I'm curious what structure they have. It's probably some kind of hybrid, I'm assuming, because again, there's the known founder.
Okay, so as I did my homework, I know what this means, but Google has a matrix-style organizational structure.
Of course they do.
What does this mean? So a matrix style, so we've up until now we've talked about like vertical structures, which is like a pyramid, horizontal structures where everybody's in charge of what they're in charge of, so R&D, design, marketing, engineering, blah, blah, blah. So they all work together. And then a matrix structure is you have both in one. So you have somebody, for example, in charge of maybe products. So you have people that are product leaders. What are they called? Product. I'm one of these, but I don't know what it's called.
Managers?
Yeah, product managers. And then you're going to have a technical person, a marketing person, a salesperson, and then they work together on each thing. So the technical person is going to work with this person for this project, and then with this person
it's like
for
a grid.
this project. Exactly.
Yeah.
So you're reporting to lots of different managers on different projects.
Yeah.
As one of these people, and as one of these people on the top, on the product managers, you're reporting. you're working with each person in each department.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, yeah, it makes sense. Oh God, just hit my microphone. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. The bigger a company is, I think the vertical aspect of it just makes sense. But yeah, to find a way to implement kind of the pros of the horizontal, it's interesting how different ones do it. What's the company that's? I think it's a UK-based company that's really big. I want to say Harrods, but it's not Harrods. But it's something like that have a really different structure where it's actually the employees in the shop that are kind of the ones that call the shots. I can't think of it. I could swear that it's some kind of not shopping center. What's
Is
the
it
word?
John Lewis?
John Lewis, yes. They have a really unique. I don't really properly know much about it or understand it really all that much, but I've heard that it's very different.
Okay, so it's called an employee-owned business. So John Lewis is like it has department stores in the UK and supermarkets that are called Waitrose. So it's kind of the posh ones.
yeah, the posh ones. I didn't know they owned Waitrose as well. I didn't know that John Lewis and Waitrose were connected.
Now you know.
No, I know.
And so all of the employees are called partners. And apparently every permanent employee has a stake in the business. So they like share the profits, have a say in all the decisions, which makes sense because if you're working in a department store, you're the one that's in contact with clients.
Exactly. You're with the customer. So if you're seeing something day in and day out, it makes sense that you'd be able to be okay to say, this, we're going to change this because, and then let the higher ups that aren't there know. But yeah, I think it is quite different, as in I don't think obviously there's lots of other businesses that do the same kind of, that are in the same kind of, not service, but the same kind of thing. And yeah, I think they're quite unique in that, which is interesting.
I mean, I think that's also a really interesting subject, is when it's ideal to have your employees have a stake in the business, so like benefit with the profits.
Definitely.
And when it's best to just like pay them for their time.
Yes. Yeah.
What do you think? If you were to now go bigger with your studio, what do you think would make sense? Or what do you think would be most efficient to get the best out of your employees?
I think giving them a stake in the business makes more sense. I think that it just makes you feel like you're more part of the company and you also want it to succeed. Like it's its success is your success rather than it's just something that you do until 5 p.m. and then you don't care. I mean, not that people would have to be more involved outside of office hours or anything like that, but I think it makes more sense. I think when you can do that, I think it leads to more of a teamwork feel within the company. Like this is our thing. What do you think?
I know that lots of companies, especially startups, when they found, so if, for example, you're two co-founders, you'll assign your percentages to each other, and then you save like maybe 20% or 15% of the shares to then be distributed to your first employees.
Yeah.
So they like count that in so that your first sales director or your first design manager or your first employees can be given a stake. I think on one side, that's probably because startups maybe don't have as much of an ability to pay you a decent salary. So,
or even just have like extras like healthcare included or whatever, you know, like other things like that, or not paid leave, not or whatever, but you know, just little perks that a more established company would be able to offer you.
And I also think it's in small companies, especially in startups or young companies, I would say, it's what a new employee does is very critical. So like you say, like
Definitely.
if we're talking Nestle, if I get hired by Nestle tomorrow, the decisions I make probably won't make that much of a difference.
Yeah.
So as long as I do my job and I'm happy enough in my job, then it's probably good enough. Whereas if I'm hired by a 2-person company, then it's going to have a big impact whether I'm putting my all into it or not.
Yeah, definitely.
And then
that was a fun little detour.
Yeah. And then it's a question of how much are you as a founder willing to give away from your own profit and benefit
Yeah.
to a new employee, because it is a risk. Anyway.
Yeah.
It's maybe a detour for another day.
Yes.
Okay, and then I have another 2 examples.
Okay.
One of them, which is so funny, is Spotify. So Spotify works with cross-functional squads. They have their whole own vocabulary, okay? It's like going into a fantasy world. So you got to put your Harry Potter brain on.
Okay.
So the cross-functional squads, they have shared leadership for different products. So they're like mini startups in the company. So this is I don't know what the different products of Spotify are, but
I guess like they've just come out with
Podcast.
the new things that you can do of like the blend feature, maybe that, like the different features that they offer within like creating playlists. Also, they have like the Spotify for artists, Spotify for podcasters.
there you go.
All that
So each
stuff,
of them is their own little mini startup.
Wow.
But then within these squads, so you have the squads, which are your little mini startups, a group of squads working in related areas. So if we're talking maybe features or playlist features, then you'll have a squad for each feature. And then all of the playlist features that work together, they're called tribes. So like personalization or
We're the
podcast
playlist tribe.
Yeah, exactly.
So funny.
Which squad are you in? So each tribe has a
Amazing.
tribe lead who coordinates, but doesn't dictate, coordinates.
Coordinates, yeah.
So your squads, which are maybe 10 people, they go into tribes, and the tribes are maybe 100 people. So they're big enough to get a lot done and collaborate in a good way, but they're small enough to stay agile. So they can still, I don't know, 100 people is already a lot of people.
Yeah.
And then separately, you have chapters. Now, chapters, I guess they're within these tribes and squads, but chapters are people with similar skills.
Okay.
So you'll have back-end engineers, front-end engineers. So back-end is like what you don't see on the screen, and front-end is what you do see on the screen. You'll have designers, and then they each work within the tribes and within the squads. But then I guess
to make sure that everything is still coherent.
Yeah,
That if
makes
you
sense.
create a playlist or a blend, or if you are in Spotify for podcasters or Spotify for artists or Spotify as a just a user, you know, listening to music, it all feels like Spotify, I guess.
That's
Yeah.
So you'd have like a designer that works in each of the squads
Yeah.
to make sure
Yeah.
it's coherent.
Yeah. So they're like, wait. That is starting to look too much like an independent startup. That doesn't look like Spotify anymore. Let's bring it back.
You're off on one, guys. Bring it back. Rein it in.
Yeah, exactly.
So your chapters also have chapter leads.
It must be such a mammoth company to
imagine.
crazy to think
What an
about.
experience, eh? To work in a
Yes.
company like that. Just to
Like
see
that.
how things work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's hard to imagine almost. Like, you know how they say it's hard to imagine like what €1,000,000 looks like. Like you can't.
Have you seen a video of somebody that does it with like rice?
No.
You need to watch that.
I need to watch that. But yeah, like the idea of that many people working inside of a company, it's like hard to imagine how that would be. Yeah, how that works at all, how anyone gets anything done. Crazy.
So there you go. And then you also have guilds. This is the last one.
Guilds.
Guilds are voluntary communities of interest.
Like, what are they called when you test? Is it test groups? No. Like when you test something new on a group of people before going live with it.
Ah.
Could it be that? Like if you, like the blend feature that came out not too long ago, if they like got a, what's it called? It's not test group, but a group of people to test it out first and then see if they thought it worked or not. And then volunteers. Yeah, I don't know.
Guilds. I don't understand what guilds are. If you at home know what a guild is within Spotify, if you
worked in Spotify, you are
please let
a guild in Spotify. Yeah, we'd love to know.
The information I've got right. So, voluntary communities of interest, like Android Guild or Agile Coach Guild. They can cut across squads and tribes. Kind of like an open Slack channel with optional meet. This doesn't make any sense.
No. You're saying words at this point.
I think up until now is very interesting. So Spotify has squads, mini startups that go into tribes. And then you have people that work
throughout them all. Yeah.
Chapters. So that's definitely not horizontal or vertical.
No. Yeah, that's their own little thing they've got going on there.
And then the last example I have is Netflix. Which I think officially it's considered a vertical company, but it's flat in spirit and there's a lot of trust.
That doesn't sound good. It's flat in spirit. But yeah, sorry.
So basically the people that work for them have a lot of responsibility. So it's not like it just relies on your manager. So there's a lot of trust and responsibility. Although I'm not sure how I feel about this, because one of the things they say is there's no fixed vacation policy, no fixed holidays or expense policy. So how much you can spend on your particular project, just act in Netflix's best interest.
See, with a big company, I don't see how that works. In the next episode that we're going to be recording, which I've taken the lead on, which is working with friends and family, that is something that kind of goes into all of that. And when it's maybe a smaller company and you have like shared values and all that, so like best interest would be, you'll consider it to be the same or have a similar outlook on what that could be. Maybe could work. But like we talked about in, I think, episode 7 about not getting screwed over in business, like clarity and having things vary so that everybody has that reference is so important. So that vagueness.
Exactly. I mean, I don't know how I'd feel about there's no holiday policy. Yeah. So what if I want to go away for a month?
In Netflix's best interest, I feel I need to take a 2-month holiday.
Because then I'm going to be ready to work.
I will be working on my best, 100%. And yeah, it definitely lends itself to, depending on the kind of person that works there, as in the kind of person to either take advantage of it or be completely consumed by it. And there probably is a mix of that, and that's why it works if it is balanced out that way. Because there's no way that everybody responsibly just takes 28 days that you're supposed to take throughout a year.
I feel like, I think I heard this as well, that people just don't take holiday because they feel guilty. You feel guilty, exactly.
Yeah, you're going to have that. And then on the other hand, the people who are just like, well, they haven't told me no, so I'm going to take advantage and, But you get more people that are like, well, if I, feel guilty about it. That feel like if they take a holiday, then it's going to just put more stress on their other people. And if everybody wants to take a week off in August because that's when it's summer and your kids are off of school and stuff, the company just suddenly nobody down to half the staff because everyone's gone on holiday.
Yeah.
Everyone's in Hawaii.
They also have a thing called the keeper test, which means that they often ask themselves, so like as managers or people, decision makers, they often ask themselves, if this person were to like tell me that they're leaving, if this employee were to tell me they're leaving, would I fight to keep them? And if the answer is no, they let them go. So you being able to like take off your days of vacation or whatever, that depends so much on the manager you have.
Yeah.
So if you have a cool manager like us,
then you'd be fine.
You'd be fine. You just work to your best and then you take the breaks that you need. But if you have an old-fashioned manager that believes in 5 to 9 p.m. or 5 to 2, then you're stuffed.
Yeah, I don't like it because it depends too much. There's too much depending going on there.
So that's how Netflix works.
Interesting.
So acting,
and I mean, it's obviously going well for them.
Yeah, I mean, I just looked it up because I wondered how many people they employ, and they're at like 13,000 in 2024. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people to be taking holidays whenever they want or never.
Yeah, it's also interesting. Although Spotify had a little bit of this as well, that they kept trying to implement things that then people were so unhappy with them that they were like losing users, and then they'd like be like, no, we're just kidding. Don't leave. We're not going to do that in the end, and all that, those kind of things. I wonder if I don't know. Yeah, interesting.
So there you go. There's some examples of companies and how they do things. And then this doesn't really have that much to do with organizational structure, but it was a question that popped into my mind as I was prepping. And that's for you and for our listeners. Honestly, I would be so interested to hear, because I think it depends so much on the person, but would you prefer to work for or work in a big corporate or a small startup? And I'm going to go even further in the question by saying, if you're working at a big corporate, you're having a small impact in a very big project. So the company itself makes a big impact in the world, but you're having a very small influence on that. Whereas in a startup, generally speaking, unless you're the startup of the year, unicorn, whatever, you're likely to be making a lot of impact, but in a small project that doesn't necessarily make as much impact on a global scale.
I guess it's the small fish in a big pond, or big fish in a
small bowl.
Whatever it was. Yeah, whatever it was. Question. I think it just truly depends on where you want to take your professional career, I would say. Because if being a manager and such, or even having your own company one day or anything like that, isn't your priority, I think it looks better on your CV to have worked for these big companies. Whereas working for startups and, like you said, having that bigger impact, if you do want to then become a manager, then even if it's a smaller company, what your responsibilities are going to be more maybe impressive if that's what you would want to do. I think for me, my idea was, before becoming self-employed, to work in bigger companies to learn from them. So I think to get a good idea of the kind of how companies are run, how it feels to be in those kind of big teams, I think is really interesting. I think also when they're kind of medium sized rather than big. I know I have a few friends who they work with like 50 to 100 people, and they love it, because it is a nice like sweet spot. I think I would drive myself crazy being in a big like vertical situation. Like if it was something like, I don't know, Amazon, or I don't know, whatever. I think it would just feel so meaningless. I am curious about it though. It would be an interesting experience, but I think I would always go smaller where you feel like at least you're getting you're actually making a bit more of a difference to that company.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of like, do you think if you were to try going into one of these big companies, so imagine you get hired by Amazon, would you be interested in the whole climbing the ladder kind of thing?
I think because of the kind of person I am, I think I would be doing that without even really like realizing. Like I think I would be pushing myself to go higher up and just to have more control over decisions and stuff. I think just because of who I am, I think I would, even if I didn't set out being like, okay, one day I'm going to be
CEO of Amazon,
the second in command or whatever. I think I would naturally just kind of work towards that. Mm-hmm. What about you?
I mean, I think it's such a good question. And also, I mean, again, I've only worked in startups, basically. I haven't had any professional experience in big companies. And I've had people say to me, oh, the day you do, it'll be nothing to do with it. You have no idea, blah, blah, blah. And I agree that I think you can learn a lot from a big company in how companies work. And I've always thought that you would learn more. But nowadays, I'm not so sure that that's true. Because you touch on so, like, you have such a specific role. I mean,
you don't have to wear all the hats.
Exactly.
Yeah. It depends.
You learn
so
a lot
much
about
on
one particular thing, and you learn about how that company works. But I feel like I would very, very quickly get bored.
Yeah, your own skill set wouldn't develop in any way, in any significant way, maybe. Yeah, absolutely. I guess also a pro of it is being able to turn off. You've got your job, you've got your to-do list, you do what you got to do, and then you go home and you can completely disassociate. You've left work at work kind of thing. Whereas I think the smaller the company, the more responsibilities you have. So the more you do feel that, wanting to kind of keep working even when you're not at the office. But I think we would both get bored. I mean, just the fact that we've never been in that situation, I think says it all. We've never, it's not something we've ever looked. We've never looked at trying to get in that kind of position. So,
and then in terms of accomplishment, so like if you were to work towards like a mission, so like I work in sustainability, and that's also been a big question for me since I started looking into the world of working, is where do I put my energy? Do I put my energy into having a big impact in a company that's making a little difference, or do I put my energy into working towards, like, imagine if I were to be hired by a fossil fuel company. So like I'm hired by FIPSA, which has now changed its name, hasn't it?
What? Has it?
Yeah, I think, hasn't FIPSA now changed their name to be more sustainable?
What's unsustainable about FIPSA?
Yeah, it's called Mueve. So
I hadn't seen this.
Mueve, that used to be called FIPSA, which is a fossil fuel company, is now with its new branding. Maybe be interesting for you to look at.
Yeah, I'll take a look out of curiosity, see what they've done.
So they're now trying to move away from fossil fuels and go towards like sustainable energy and mobility based on sustainable transport, etc.
That's cool, because I don't know if they are Spanish. I assume if they changed their name to Mueve, they must be. But if they are only Spanish, I mean, I'd say you've got Repsol, and then the second most common petrol station you see is Cipsa. So it's cool that a big company like that is taking that kind of initiative. And if they are also outside of Spain, even more.
Yeah, this is the thing. So like when Cipsa makes this decision to go sustainable, that makes a massive impact, unless it's all greenwashing. But if it's true that Cipsa making that change is going to make a much bigger impact than a small startup that's now sold to 3 more customers their sustainable tote bags, you know?
Yeah.
So do you feel more accomplishment working within
being
a
part of
big
something bigger?
structure? It's such a hard one, because I feel like
Yeah.
you maybe you feel good that you're working in a good company, but do you feel that satisfaction, that accomplishment yourself, like you do in a startup?
Yeah.
Let us know at home.
Yeah,
what
let
you
us know what
think.
you guys think. Yeah. Yeah. For the umpteenth time in this episode, it all depends. Yeah.
So to finish off, I have some questions that we solicited and have been written in.
Exciting.
So question number 1. I work at a startup where no one really has a job title and decisions are super informal. It was fun at first, but now it feels chaotic. How do you know when it's time to introduce more structure? Right, well, working at a startup where decisions are super informal and nobody really has a job title, I think this can be very frustrating.
Yeah.
I don't think that's even a horizontal structure.
No, I think, yeah. I think nobody has a job title. That can be very common in a startup. I think that is just how it is. You can have someone who's maybe a bit more specialized in one thing or another, but I think in not expecting anything different in that aspect, I think is just unrealistic. But decisions feeling informal, maybe a bit, chaotic. I think that's just, even if it is a horizontal structure, there still has to be some sort of like manager, leader kind of energy in there.
There's clarity. So like, you're in charge of this, you're in charge of this, you're in charge of this.
Yeah.
And we work together. But I mean, that's how we manage our podcast team.
Yep. Yeah.
So everybody has something they're in charge of, and then they make the calls on that. And even if they ask other people to help with those things, the mental weight and the final, decisions,
responsibility or whatever.
Yeah, the responsibility falls on that person, so it's they're in charge of that getting done. I think if you don't have these roles clear, then either everybody's working on the same things and getting flustered, and because everybody's not always agreeing, or
and just the productivity of the company. Yeah, exactly. It's not going to be productive. You're not going to get good results. So when to I mean, I don't know if this person that's written in is in a position to say to other people, right, this isn't working. We are going to change this.
I think you're always in that position.
Yeah.
You're always in a position to at least have a conversation.
Yeah. To say, okay, I feel like we could just be doing so much better. That there are better ways to work as a team and see what kind of feedback, what kind of answer you get from the rest of the team. If everybody is in denial and thinks it's great, and then maybe it's just not the place for you. But hopefully it opens a conversation to be had, because there was no kind of I had a siesta today and I'm struggling.
Would you like some
Words
cranberries?
are not coming. Yes, I would. Words are just not coming. But yeah, there was no hint in that question of should I leave. It was just, should I try and implement structure? So she obviously likes the job, likes what they're doing at the startup. So I think it's definitely worth to, say, I believe in this project. That's why I'm here. That's why I, chose this startup over other ones. Let's see how we can make it be much more effective and get much more done. And hopefully it starts an open conversation.
Yeah,
about
and
it.
you can also always say, let's try it for a month. If you don't like it, we'll go back.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And bye-bye. Yeah.
Speaking of leaving, off topic, I have like 4 or 5 friends that have recently quit their jobs to go travel.
Oh.
Or to like do something different.
Oh, wow.
I feel like we're at
Interesting.
an interesting age.
We are. Yeah, we are. So we're 26, going on 27 this year. And yeah, most of our friends are around that age. And yeah, it is definitely a time when you think, okay, I've been working now for a good couple years, and a moment to take over, like, do I in every, like, am I enjoying it? Is it, yeah, what's the pay like? What, you know, is this how I see myself? I think now people are a lot more open to
Taking a risk.
changing career paths. It's something that even when we were in school, it felt like you were choosing for the rest of your life. But I think it always was a bit more like whatever you chose, that was just the job you did. I think now people are a lot more aware that you can just, if you decide at 25 or 30 or 40 or 60 that you want to change career paths, it's fine. And I think that's great that people are, you know, reflecting on, do I want to continue like this or not? So yeah, that's so funny that you've had 4 or 5 people just be like, nope.
And they don't necessarily know each other. It's not like they've all agreed.
Yeah.
I think we're at like an age
Probably a domino
where,
effect.
yeah, where in school, like at university, we had the time to travel, but we didn't have the budget.
Yeah.
Whereas now, when we've been working for a few years, you start saving, and then you're like, okay, I've been working now for 3 years. Is this now me done?
Yeah.
Like, is this what life is going to be like for the rest of my life? Oh, maybe not. Oh, I've saved up a bit of money. Maybe I can spend it traveling and then figure out what I want to do.
Crazy.
And like, I think it would be interesting if all of them disliked their jobs, but it's not the case. I'm trying to think. A couple of them definitely disliked their jobs, so they just quit.
Yeah. There wasn't a difficult decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then, like, one of them, he's been working at this company now for 6 years because he started working there while he was doing his studies, and he loves his job. But he's just like, I want to go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you had a bit of a moment of that last year
That's true.
where you were kind of thinking like, I, you know, do love this job. I'm really happy with where I am. And, you know, you've been there from the end of your studies.
Yeah.
But it was starting to feel maybe a little bit samey or claustrophobic or whatever. And you had a moment of, oh, do I leave and, you know, travel? Do I stay? It's not easy.
So I did both.
You managed to find a balance. Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, you managed to do a little bit of both.
And I started a company to keep me entertained.
Never a dull moment. Yeah.
But yeah, so one of the one that does love his job, he's quitting and going to New Zealand for a year.
Wow.
I think what's good is that, I mean, I'm sure he'll find something else to do, and who knows where life will take him after that. But if he did want to come back to that company,
he probably would have a place.
Yeah, he's been there from the beginning of the company, and he's a brilliant employee. So I think he wouldn't.
They would take him back.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's good, because I'm sure he does know, like, that's there, like, as a little security blanket kind of thing, that take the risk, but if it doesn't work out, I've got a plan B backup.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's brilliant. Then you definitely do it. Try it. Try something different. I mean, there's not much to lose if you've got that kind of option to go back. So, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Anyway, back to them.
Anyway.
Okay. We have 5 layers of management above me. I get why it exists, but sometimes I wonder if half the decisions are just people trying to look busy. How do you stay motivated in this kind of hierarchy? How do you stay motivated?
Yeah, I think that's something that has to come from within you. I think motivation is something that lots of people can struggle with within their job, even if it isn't this kind of one that she's described or they're describing. I mean, I think it can be difficult.
Yeah, I think you have to find the value in your work. If you feel that your work is valuable, then you'll be motivated to do it, usually. So I think maybe understanding what your work is working towards, and maybe having that conversation with your manager to understand, like, okay, what's the big picture? I'm not just working on my little thing for you to validate it, for the other one to validate, for the other one to give me a view on why this is important to the company. And then I feel like that could maybe motivate you more.
Yeah.
Or try and figure out the things that you enjoy doing more and try and ask if you can do more of that.
That was good advice. I support that advice.
Do you think organograms should be public inside companies, or would that just make things weird? So should you be able to see who's in charge of who, or who's in charge of what, and make it very clear?
I don't think that should make things weird. I mean,
I
it's
agree.
the reality.
Yeah.
I think it's just going to make things hopefully smoother and faster and
More
clearer. Yeah.
I agree. I don't think that should be. I don't think like being somebody's manager should be considered that you're any better. You just have a different job role. And
Exactly.
and if that can make things clearer so that they know when they have to, or people know that when they want to talk to somebody to get something done, to know the right people to talk to. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I also think it's good for yourself to know, because sometimes people don't even know who their direct manager is, or like who their indirect manager is.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think it can only be a positive thing.
Humanizes it a bit, I think. Maybe not.
Also true. I think so, because it doesn't feel like you're just filing a report that's getting sent off. You know, you're talking to somebody, and then you can maybe also, in the way that you report back, feel like it's a person talking to a person rather than just sending in a report off to the cloud for someone to see.
The iCloud.
Yeah.
Okay, last one. I'm going to give this one to you. I'm a junior designer, and I keep getting pulled into marketing meetings because we're a small team. I want to help, but I also feel like I'm being stretched way too thin. Is this what horizontal means?
Oh, it's so funny. This actually happened to me the other day. I went into a meeting and we had a whole conversation. It was me, the owner of the company, somebody who I hadn't met before, who also kind of leads into the next episode, which is actually a friend of the two founders who works in marketing and is possibly going to get involved. And at the beginning of the meeting, before jumping in, we were literally talking about how it's all, anything that's to do with kind of audiovisual, people just think it's all the same. And where you see it very commonly is that if you do anything, whether it be design, PR, any social media, anything, people think that you should also be able to do marketing, when marketing is literally its own degree of 4 years. It's got nothing. I've learned marketing along the way, but I've never, even in my degree, we didn't even do a subject about marketing. Like, it's not something I've ever, it's its own complete different thing, but it gets thrown around so much that everyone just thinks you should be. And we were literally talking about that, and then halfway through the meeting, the CEO of the company is like, and then another thing we need to do is the marketing plan. Looks at me and is like, you can do that, right? And I was just like, just literally talked about how I'm the designer and she's the one that does marketing. I can't promise it's going to be any good because it's just crazy. And he's like, oh no, yeah, you're right. So yeah, I completely understand where this person's coming from.
How did you deal with that? Like, how did you answer that question?
Well, I literally said, it's not my area of expertise. I do have knowledge of this because just running your own company and working for 5 years now in the world, you do pick things up. But I said, it's not my area of expertise, so I can, but I think you should get someone who only does marketing because it's going to be a lot stronger. It's a very important product that we're working on. It needs a strong marketing plan. I don't think I'm your person.
Nice.
You want a strong brand book? I'm there. I will give you the best brand book. Will I give you the best marketing plan? Probably not. Probably not. I give you ideas. I could work, which is what I said. I said I'd be more than happy to work with the person doing the marketing plan because I've also got a lot of ideas that could work, but they might say, no, that's not realistic because of this, and that, because it's their job and it's not mine, So to this person, I would recommend the same kind of approach where if you want to help, you do creative things, when you're doing one thing, normally your mind does go to like the full potential of something and you do get ideas. So I would just very clearly say that you are very happy to give your input, but that it is not your area of expertise and that they should maybe have someone who it is their area of expertise look over final drafts and stuff. Somewhere along those lines, just make it very clear that you are happy to help, but that it might not be
your responsibility.
Yeah, it's not going to be your responsibility, and it might not be if they want the best, marketing advice or whatever it is that they're doing. You're not their person, because it's like if they asked you for bank advice, it's not for financial advice. You can give your input. Is it going to be the best financial advice? Probably not.
Probably not.
Yeah. So if it goes bankrupt because you've asked me for financial advice, that ain't on me. Same if the marketing campaigns flop, not on me, because I gave you my advice, but I'm not taking responsibility on the results.
I mean, I think that's a good conclusion. I think in that kind of situation, obviously you have your roles and your responsibilities, and if they want you to take something new on, you need to take that into account. Like, if you really want this to be one of my new responsibilities that it wasn't before, I can see what else I have to let go of for this to become one of my responsibilities. But currently, I'm happy to help. I'm happy to give my input, but it's not my role.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe you need to hire someone or give it to the person in charge.
Yeah, yeah. Marketing is definitely one of those things that people just throw around. Like, marketing. No one really knows what it is.
You just make a pretty picture and that customers, right?
And that's it, Yeah, exactly. All of that just gets mushed into one. And marketing is definitely one of those that people use the word so loosely, and then no one really knows what they mean when they're saying marketing. And they say, marketing, that's marketing. And it's like, well, it's not actually, but okay. Whatever. So yeah.
There you go.
Interesting one. Yeah. That was
we managed to keep this. Oh no, I thought this was going to be a short one.
Well, I think for our standards, I did see that the last episode I think was like an hour and 40 minutes. So I think
we were talking about communication.
It
is pretty much our favorite topic.
Literally, I'm surprised we managed to keep it under 2 hours, to be quite honest. So yeah, I think it was 1:47 or something like that.
Poor Melina.
So
I'm sorry,
Melina. We've done a little bit better with this one. I think the next one will probably be shorter as well, hopefully.
Okay.
So. We hope you enjoyed. With all the bits that we were mentioning, we would love to hear what you guys think, and if you've got any experience in any of these kind of models and structures and all sorts, any funny stories, we would love to hear them and maybe possibly share them.
Yeah. And also, now that we've caught up a bit on our schedule, so we're now only 2 weeks ahead, then we can mention them in our next episodes, and we can make this a lot more of a conversation now. So
exactly. So we will manage podcast across most of your platforms, and at gmail.com for any direct messages that way. And see you in Working with Friends and Family.
Ooh, what a juicy one.
Yes. Bye.